Hello and welcome to the Global Leadership Podcast. My name is Whitney and I'm so glad you've chosen to take time out of your very busy day to grow and get better. As we love to say around here, when a leader gets better, everyone wins. So I'd like to thank you for investing in your leadership today. We have an amazing conversation between David Ashcraft and activist, author, and speaker Caine. I know you're going to be inspired and challenged, but before we get to that, I'd love to ask if you do me a huge favor. If you're watching this on YouTube, can you make sure you hit subscribe? It's free, and that way you won't miss out on any of the conversations that we bring you here on YouTube. We work to bring you the best, fresh, actionable leadership content that we can, and I do not want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much, and with that, let's get into today's episode. Have you ever had a moment of passion or inspiration that had a decisive and lasting impact on your life? Maybe it was a moment of clarity regarding a calling or a career or an insight about a new product or service. Some of us just seem to be wired for inspiration. Have you ever had one of those moments of inspiration that just seems to shift something deep inside of you, a moment that changes the trajectory of your calling or your career or maybe even your faith? So for me, I remember a season where I was really wrestling, and I mean really wrestling with life in general. Family life was hard, and I was carrying some deep disappointments. My career was going okay, but some parts of my role, they didn't feel like they lined up with the dreams I had once carried. Honestly, between us, I felt really stuck. But I kept praying simple, honest prayers and kept showing up day by day. Somewhere in that process, my perspective shifted. Over time, I started noticing how much I had grown and how some of the dreams I thought were fixed had changed over time. Once I opened myself up to what God was doing right where I was, I became more passionate about my role. I leaned into my strengths with more courage, and I even started to notice and see my weaknesses differently. Less as something to hide and more as an invitation to bring others alongside me. That shift happened years ago, but it gave me such clarity about my calling and giftings. And that brings me to today's guest, Caine. Caine had one of those moments where everything changed and she leaned in. She responded to that invitation, and now she has spent decades following that passion to work on behalf of the victims of trafficking all over the world. Caine and her husband founded the anti-human trafficking organization, the A21 Campaign. They've also founded, Equip, and Empower, a ministry mobilizing people to live on mission for Jesus and propel women, which comes alongside women to activate their God-given purpose. Their ministry has also planted 3 churches in Europe, bringing the gospel to the region and serving the most vulnerable during times of crisis. She's a recipient of the Mother Teresa Memorial Award and a leader of great conviction and depth. So today, we get a masterclass on how a passion-filled leader responded in that critical moment and how she has worked to stay in the game for the long haul. Let's listen in on David's conversation with Caine.
Hey, well, Caine, thank you for joining me today. It's fun to have a conversation with you.
David, it's my honor. I'm really pumped to be here.
Caine has just come off of speaking at the Global Leadership Summit for us and was also a speaker in 2010. And so it's fun to have opportunity to have further conversation coming out of the summit, Caine.
Absolutely. It was so awesome. And I'm really excited to be talking to you today.
Well, let's maybe start out finding a little bit about you personally. In looking at your description on your website, one of the words that caught my eye describes you as an activist. And as I read through the rest of your bio, Caine, you're involved in so many things, and I assume that the reason why it calls you an activist is because you don't just think about things, you do things. And there's a number of organizations that you lead. Did you choose that word, activist? And how do you think of that word as it pertains to yourself?
Yeah, I think probably I came out of the womb being an activist. I'm sure my parents, when I was younger, was like, could you just sit down and settle? But As far back as I can remember, in school even, I was always. I always say, like, I'm the most pragmatic idealist that I know, because I am just going to find a way to get something done, whether it's, rally kids to, sell lemonade at the lemonade stand when I was a kid, or are we going to start some kind of soccer team? And it was just something that was in me. I was very, I don't know, I guess now I use the language, I was very outcome oriented. It was just woven into me. It's interesting, David, because, obviously what perhaps I'm more known for now is my activism around rescuing the victims of human trafficking and, really advocating on their behalf. I think in the era in which we live, with social media, in my day, I'm old enough that I was alive when the dinosaurs still roamed the earth. So there was no internet. My children can't actually believe there was life on earth prior to the internet or prior to social media. But I think I very deliberately chose to put the word activist on my website because, some of my concern is that we think that simply maybe liking a post or virtue signaling on social media is the same as actual activism, where you're really making a difference in people's lives on the ground. And I, for as long as I'm still around, I want to show that you've got to do more than like a post or follow someone else that's doing something, or virtue signal online to truly be an activist, to truly make a difference in someone's life. So it's always been woven into the fabric of who I am, I think.
So did you know, Christine, early on that you were a leader, or how were you received by your friends or even adults if you were that much of a pragmatic and an activist even as a youngster? Did you know right away you were a leader?
Oh, look, David, I could show you evidence because I still have my 3J, which in Australia was third grade, my 3J report card where Mrs. Black, so in Australia, you go to school from, our summer is during the Northern Hemisphere's winter. So we go to school from February, through to the end of the year. And so our half year report is in June. So in June, in my half yearly report, 3J, Mrs. Black wrote, Christine has to learn that she cannot always be the leader. And she needs to settle down. Now, we're laughing about that now, 50 odd years later, but that's so deeply impacted me. You got to go back. This is 1972 that was written, when women were certainly not encouraged to be at the forefront. Not only that, I was the daughter of Greek immigrants, so I already felt a little bit marginalized in a very strict Greek Orthodox culture where women were not encouraged to, really aspire to anything. So to my parents, that was almost to have the word leader. Christine can't always be the leader. That symbolized that, wow, I must be somehow arrogant or somehow, prideful. I mean, all these negative connotations in 1972 with a kid in third grade wanting to lead. And then it must have worked there because I remember I felt so bad that in the November end of year report, Mrs. Black had written, Christine has settled down very well now. And I thought, that was somewhere where even as a 9-year-old, it went into my heart that I'm not supposed to, be out the front. So obviously that report card showed that I was able to rally people from third grade, but, 1973.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I did. And all my world was boys because I had an older brother and a younger brother. And we, being Greek, I don't know if you've seen my Big Fat Greek Wedding. That is my Big Fat Greek life. So I had all cousins. Everyone was male. So, and especially, we played soccer for all of our international people, football. It was just who we were. We would play soccer. So it was always Chris and the boys. So my life was always that. And, my parents wished I would do ballet and my mother would come and pick me up after ballet practice and I'd be out on the soccer field with all of the boys or, so it was something that was woven into me that I was surrounded by guys. I always wanted to do that. I wanted to play soccer. I wanted to be on the debating team. And especially in the 1970s, that was not what women were supposed to be doing. So, I think, thank God I had a great dad who really encouraged me. And he was
when your parents saw that note from your teacher later saying you'd settle down, did they do things to help you settle down or to try to settle you down, or were they encouraged or were they discouraged that they'd kind of
Yeah, I think
dampened
it
your
was
spirit a little bit?
divided in my household. My mum wanted me to settle down. She was sort of like, Christine, if you're too much like this, you got to go back to the 1970s. Some people listening to this will think, what are you even saying? It would be like, no one will ever want to marry you. You can't be that assertive, and of course that was the ultimate goal, that you're going to get married and have kids. My dad was a little bit of a rebel, so he used to, like, behind the scenes, really encourage me and say, Christine, and he was the one that really pushed me, to go to tertiary education, because even back in my day, my culture, certainly a woman was not encouraged. I was the only one in all of my extended family that went on to any form of tertiary education. And again, it was like, people again are going to laugh that this is actually a thing, but it was, no man is ever going to want to marry you if you're more intelligent than him. There were phrases like this. And again, when you're talking pre-internet, pre-social media, you didn't have anywhere to process any of this stuff. You didn't. So you had to build. For me, I could either resent that, or I would say it built this tenacity and resilience in me, because somehow I had to find this internal drive that went, no matter whether my culture is, averse to a woman being a leader, whether perhaps the teachers around me don't think I should be doing this, but there's something on the inside of me. So I think all of those things, and I could give you 20 more examples, where it would be, you need to sit down, you need to be quiet, you should be at the back of the line, and a lot of that, especially because of my age and the era I grew up in, was very related to my gender, that you should be doing this. And so, was it right? No. Was it good? No. But did it help to forge a strong will in me? Absolutely. And I think that has served me well in the world.
So, Christine, I've heard you talk before in similar kind of terms of helping people realize their past doesn't define who they are today. And you're definitely saying that as far as some of the things you experienced as a youngster. So fast forward third grade to you're in your early mid-20s. Were you involved in leading different causes at that point, or what point did you start leading even more publicly?
Yeah, I would say, I really became a fully devoted follower of Jesus when I was 21, and then got involved in a local church at 22. That was when I think things went up to a whole new level. Now, prior to that, all through my teens, I was leading in sports. I was the senior prefect of my school. So obviously there were things in that where I was leading within that realm. But when I became really involved in youth ministry, then I started to, we both, now I can see it all as a foundation for what I'm doing for A21. But I was 22 years old, fresh out of college. My degree was in English and economic history. So basically,
Still in Australia?
Yes, still in Australia, still living in Australia. But we had started a community-based youth centre. I think probably because of my past with, being a victim of childhood sexual abuse and just growing up feeling very marginalised because of my ethnicity, my gender, I always had a heart towards helping people. So we started a community-based youth centre. At the time in Sydney where I was, people were not doing that kind of thing. We were, helping at-risk young people. We began running, English as a second language classes. We began running anti-bullying classes. That's really where I started to find my feet, because I would go to schools and say, okay, how can we serve you? What do you need? And we would develop seminars that would serve the schools, and then we would run after school programs. And I think by learning to work, that's where I learned to work with government. I learned to work with the business sector, and how I learned to even start to publicly speak, because I would go to Rotary clubs. I don't know if they even still exist, but in Australia, I would go to different gatherings of, your local business councils. And that's how I learned to fundraise. That's how I learned to share vision. That's how I learned to inspire others to get involved. I guess sitting in local council meetings, you learn to advocate, you learn about due process. A lot of that is tedious and long term, but that's where I began to develop that at 22, and I did that from 22 through to I did it for about 7 years, 29, 30. Then I took over for the particular denomination I was a part of. They would run large-scale youth events, like 20,000 young people in, stadiums, and that's where I learnt to work and rally, working across denominations, across the community sector, getting the buy-in from schools, getting the buy-in from local governments, and then working. And I think that's where I learned how to navigate the complexities of living in a pluralistic world. Australia, is very secular culture, always has been. And so you really learn to navigate. So, I have my personal faith, and how can that make a difference in a world with others that didn't believe the same way that I believed, and how could I do good in that community? So a lot of those things I learned there. And again, and I'm saying this now, I was the only woman. I was the only woman running a community-based youth centre. To this day, we're recording this in 2025, I'm still the only woman that has ever held that position in Australia of running the state youth movement, which I'm not proud of, because I would have thought by now, that was in 1990, 96, that was 30 years ago. I would have hoped that by now there would be more women come through. And then I went from that to, of course, that opened up opportunities globally, and I would be invited by different organizations from all around the world to help with youth policy, young people, and out of that later then came A21, which, then is what I do there. So I think immediately I could tell you, I could give you the date, 29th of January, 1989. Many people watching this were not even alive in 1989, but that's when I walked in to a warehouse in the back of the suburbs of Sydney, Australia, into this local church. And for me, and I guess I'm just grateful that I walked into a church that really affirmed women and the gifts of women and gave women a place, because that was the beginning of, where I am today, almost 4 decades later. But I immediately stepped into leadership, began to rally people, gather people, and get people to rally around a vision.
Yeah, very cool how God took all of your gifts, your experiences, and funneled them into what you're doing today, which you're doing a lot today. Yeah. So if the word activism means you're doing a lot, then you're doing a bunch. So talk a little bit about some of the organizations. So you lead A21, you lead Equip and Empowering, which is really kind of mobilizing people to serve and live in a way that they've been designed by God to. You got Propel Women, which is for women leaders. You've launched churches. You've got a podcast. You're doing all kinds of speaking. So it seems like one of the common elements as I look at those, but feel free to describe them a little bit, Christine, but it's all of them are caring for people, or all of them seem to be advocating for people to be who God designed them to be, and strengthening people.
I would say that is the root of it. I'm very committed to purpose. I think a lot of us, and particularly if you're out of a Christian community, you sort of get the saved piece. And a lot of that, though, is I'm kind of just biding time here on earth until I get to the other side and I'm going to get to heaven. So it's whereas I truly believe, as Paul writes to Timothy, we are saved and called. There is a purpose. And so what drives me, what fuels me, is to see people be activated and launched into their God-given purpose, and also simultaneously, and especially as I get older, although I've done this all the way through, is to create pipelines and pathways behind me so that people can be, I know the different systems and structures I've come up against that perhaps have thwarted my development in some areas, or, held it back in some ways. And I want to try to remove some of those roadblocks and help people to see, because a lot of times I think it's unintentional, and of course I'm always going to be advocating for women. So a lot of people would say, no, I really believe in empowering women and helping women to fulfill their God-given purpose. And then I think I can come alongside and go, okay, well, let's look at some of your systems, your assumptions, your structures, and let's do an honest assessment, almost like this organization that I work back within Australia, and I'm like, okay, you say this, and yes, but it was 1996 to 2002 that I led that. It is now 2025. So you can say as much as you want that I'm all about it, but the proof is in the pudding. And the fact is there hasn't been. So obviously there's something inherently stifling the women's development in our systems and structures. So let's look at what that might be, or maybe even our assumptions. And so I think I'm as committed to that. And a lot of that comes probably because of so much adversity that I had to face in my past, personally, emotionally, and systemically, that I just thought, if God can help me to overcome that, then others can do that as well. And so I've been talking about my journey and life story and the obstacles and challenges I've had to overcome since the beginning, before anyone was talking about it, before me too.
Was that hard for you to do?
Yeah, it was, because especially in the early 90s, the word abuse, I never even heard the word abuse until the early 90s. So I didn't even have language at first to even frame what had happened to me. But then I don't know why, and I think again it's the grace of God. He just helped me to understand that people will connect with your weaknesses. So if I'm, you could, you read that list of what I do, and can I just say, it is not me. Number one, a lot of the stuff that I'm leading together with my husband, and he is a very important piece in what we're doing. It would be, in fact, operationally, he is the one leading all of the A21 offices around the world, all of the staff, all of the things. I'm a visionary, but there is no way I'm doing the operations at all. You couldn't. I'm only one person, and we have a team of hundreds of people. And so there is no way, I get to set a lot of vision, but I pretty much do only what I do, which is, the speaking, the writing, the envisioning, and then nobody can do all of this alone. But
and Christine, can I just say real quick, it's exciting to know that you did find a husband, somebody that would love you with all of your strengths and all your leadership abilities, in spite of what you might have been warned as a third grader. So,
and I think I did find one that was a miracle. And my husband is number 14 of 15 children. His mother had 15 full-term pregnancies in 17 years. And so, but the thing about my husband is his mother was worked very high up in the medical profession. He's got there's 8 girls, 6 boys. So all of his sisters, worked with the Attorney General's department in Australia, in law, in medicine, in science, in technology. So I knew when I met him that he was never going to be intimidated by someone like me at all. And nor did he have any thought that I wouldn't flourish in life. I mean, he's as committed to my flourishing as I'm committed to his, and that together we could be a potent force. And certainly my impact is, tenfold minimum by coming in together. And we've been doing this together for 30 years. And so we've grown together.
One other family question. So you mentioned you have children. Do any of your children carry your traits as far as just that active leadership trait?
I think, my eldest, she just graduated college as we're recording this. She's in Argentina doing an internship right now, and she's great. And she's going to come on board and work in A21, so she's got this real drive. And again, at college, it all came out. She was in a sorority. She was leading a whole lot of different things. She's like that. Our youngest is studying comparative literature and screenwriting in Paris, France. So they both have a big worldview. They both love the world. Each has got, their own distinctive. They're very much like their dad as well. So they would have traits of both of us. Yeah. But if you're wondering if they're strong and confident women, you don't have to wonder. They do. But they're loving and kind and compassionate and beautiful as well. They've got
right.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, this is Eric, content producer for the Global Leadership Podcast. Wanted to take just a minute to thank today's sponsor, Tyndale. For more than 60 years, Tyndale has helped readers discover the life-giving truths of God's Word. Tyndale is one of the largest independently owned Christian publishers in the world, and though their business has grown, their mission remains the same: to open God's Word to as many people as possible in a language that they can relate to and understand. A great example of the type of resources you can find at Tyndale is Rules of Resilience by best-selling author, speaker, and CEO Valerie Burton. What if you could learn the secret to thriving, no matter what obstacles, setbacks, or challenges come your way? In her new book, Rules of Resilience, Valerie Burton teaches you how to build or strengthen your own personal resilience system, offering practical strategies that you can employ immediately to conquer obstacles, overcome setbacks, achieve greater happiness, and succeed at higher levels than ever before. Drawing on more than 2 decades of experience as a personal and executive coach and her extensive work in the pioneering field of applied positive psychology, Burton consolidates intriguing research into easy-to-remember rules that can be put into practice right away. In the book, Burton reveals how to build a level of mental and emotional fitness and strength that will transform your work, relationships, finances, and health. Once you know the rules of resilience and start practicing them, you'll discover that it's possible to learn how to grow through challenges and not just go through them. If you're ready to learn the secrets of life-changing resilience, find Valerie Burton's new book, Rules of Resilience, at your favorite bookstore, www.tyndale.com. There will also be a link in today's show notes. Once again, thank you to today's sponsor, Tyndale.
So, Christine, as you're talking, there's all kinds of things that happened in your past that gave you passions and interest for the future. One of the things you've been able to do, and so let's use A21 as an example. You had an idea of something you wanted to do, and feel free to describe what that idea was, but you didn't just have that idea, you actually acted on it, and now there's a whole organization. And so during the month of September, we're talking about just the whole idea of execution. And you've got to move beyond vision, you've got to move beyond an idea and actually execute. And so maybe describe what A21 is, and feel free even, I always love your story of how you even started A21 or what was the situation that happened. But then maybe describe how you moved it from an idea to executing.
Thanks, David. I was 40 years old. I had just had my second child. I do need you to know, David, when you're 40 and you pop out a kid, you are not really asking the Lord for a new ministry. I wanted a vacation on Santorini. I'm like, here I am, Lord, send everyone else. I was not looking for that, but I was going to speak at a conference in Greece, in Thessaloniki, and I saw the posters of missing women and children. And as I honed in, I spoke about this at the summit and just saw the picture of one little girl. Her name was Sophia, my daughter that I had just, was still just a newborn. And that was a defining moment for me, because I went from, looking at someone else's missing child to seeing my own daughter. And I think that's the big thing. When you see, you can't unsee. When you look, you could look away. But when you see, you can never unsee. And so I think it wouldn't be wrong for me to use the word I was haunted. Like, I couldn't sleep at night. I just could see the pictures of these young children. I didn't know what to do. And I think that's where we mostly are. And can I just say, when we started A21, this was my biggest thing. I didn't want just to move people, because especially women, their mother's heart, and men would be so angry and they're like, let's just go take out all the traffickers. Of course, if you're normal, that's what you're going to be thinking. But I didn't want to frustrate people to say, here's all this thing and we can do nothing. There is nothing worse than going, what can I do? You will see that on our website. For anybody even watching this, there is something you can do today. We make it so simple, from the most simple thing that will make a difference, that will take you a very little amount of time, zero money, but you can make a difference in to you can be overly involved and do whatever you need to do. But that was right at the beginning. I was like, I don't want to leave anyone feeling how I'm feeling, which is I'm aware and I can do nothing, because I don't think that just paralyzes and cripples you. And so I didn't know what to do, and this is what I would say to anyone of the beginning of execution: you've got to start where you are and start with what you have. I didn't even sit down and write lofty goals back then. I didn't write, people look now, we're delivering programs in 22 countries. We have 10 global offices. People normally start like that, going, this is how we're going to plan, and then you're still never going to get there. This is what I knew. I've got a mouth. I've got the ear. In the context of what I did, I was speaking at a lot of conferences. So I thought, okay, first thing I can do is educate myself And so I went and I started going to any other organization I could find. And at that time, there wasn't that many, like 20 years ago. I would fly anywhere in the world to meet with any director, anyone that was developing any programs, anyone that was doing anything in the space of prevention and awareness, so that I could understand and so that I could be educated. And I didn't want to reproduce the wheel. I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't need to do what someone else is doing. So let me find gaps. And then as I started to educate myself, I didn't speak outside of my realm of knowledge. I just started talking about what happened to me and what I saw and what I'm learning. And so I just began. And then, as these things, I've worked this out in all of my life. I didn't try to overpromise and underdeliver. I just began sharing where I was at, using the tools that I had at that time. I didn't have a lot of knowledge. I didn't have a lot of experience, but I had a mouth and I had passion. So I would begin then by sharing it within the context. And, predominantly I shared it back then in women's conferences because I could speak to a mother's heart. So I thought, start there, and I think a lot of people might have thought, wow, that's not really going to make a difference. She's not talking. No, nowadays, we consult with governments and we talk with, law enforcement, and we have partnerships all around the world at every level. But I just never devalued starting where I was. And I've never done that anywhere. When I go right back to the youth centre, I started right there. My local community, the local business guys, the local park that had at-risk young people there. And I would say the same with women. Today Propel Women is global. We run all these cohorts and, it all looks really magnificent and great. But it started with one woman where I thought, okay, before I die, I don't want to leave a legacy once I'm old and I can't do anything. I want to start now creating mentoring and coaching opportunities for young. I could either complain about the fact that young women don't have the same opportunities, or I could create an environment where they have. Now, when it all began, nothing looked fabulous. And again, I keep coming back to, thank God there was no internet or Instagram, because I didn't feel like I had to impress anybody with anything. I just felt like I had to start doing something. I don't know how we can best help inspire a younger generation to do that, because we feel that everything has to be beautifully curated, posted, cropped, edited, and it has to look magnificent. And so then we never, ever roll up our sleeves and just get involved in the mess of starting where we are. So, what today is a very robust and awesome. It is. A21 is a phenomenal anti-trafficking organisation. We reach the vulnerable. We make sure that we recover victims and we restore survivors. It's comprehensive. It's holistic. It's global. But it started with.
Start there. Yeah.
No, it started with me being moved. And then within my sphere, which back then, 20 years ago, did not look that exciting, I'm talking to a bunch of mothers and I start saying, oh, girls, look what I saw. We've got to do. And I remember that first conference, and there was, a few dozen of us that said, okay, I go, well, I don't know what we can start doing. Let's start writing to our local government. Let's start. Yeah. And then they would give, and they'd give, $5, and we would start. And it literally is that basic. That's how it started. And
Christina, I love hearing that, because one of the things that the summit does, the leadership summit, people will listen to a speaker like yourself, and we really believe that God will put a seed or a thought or an idea in somebody's heart or their mind while they're sitting there listening to you talk, of something that they're passionate about, something that they are stirred by. And the temptation is to look at where A21 is now, or Propel Women is now, and say, well, I could never do that. And so we just almost cripple ourselves because we think we can't move forward. But I love your advice. If you just start with what you have now, where you are now, and then watch and see where God takes that and where it grows and develops. And so exciting to see that happen in those different ministries. Speaking up, and you said, use your voice, share your thoughts, your passions, what you're seeing and learning, which is exciting. Now, at some point, it had to move beyond just you talking, and so you had to start delegating in the execution. Was that an easy thing for you to delegate to others, or do you like to hold on to things and do it yourself? And you mentioned your husband kind of running things for you. And
I think like anybody, of course, you birth the baby, you want to raise the baby. But if you really want at some point that baby to really flourish and thrive and go further than you've got to let it go. Like, I mean, I think, and for the mothers and women kind of listening to this, you kind of know that you become an empty nester, your kid goes off to college, you have to be able to launch them. So really for A21, and this again, I thank God, my husband is every bit, he could probably be on this podcast better than me. His degree is in business banking finance. So he has a very, very, a great way of understanding systems, structures, organizational leadership. And we had a really big conversation and made a decision, okay, do we really want to move the needle on this issue? Because then you go beyond, and both are okay. You just have to decide which one you want to do. We had to go beyond Christine's passion project because she's passionate about this issue. And would it have been okay to keep it like that? Yes, but it would have died with me. Or do we really want to move the needle on the issue of human trafficking? And do we really want to collaborate globally and see this thing shut down in our lifetime? Well, yes, and even if it's not, we want to give it a go and really say, okay, could we really work towards abolishing slavery in our lifetime? To do that, it has to be bigger than me. It needs expertise that I don't have. It needs the time that I had to decide, am I going to stop doing everything else to do this? And when we sort of measured all of those things and went, okay, it's not, then I had to emotionally disconnect, not from the issue, but from how we were going to get the outcomes. Because, as you can tell with my personality, I would be pretty decisive about how I wanted certain things to go. Well then, and especially if you're working with your spouse and you're co-leading in this way, if you want to stay married, you're going to have some clearly defined lines about what he's responsible for, what I'm responsible for, and that we would just choose to trust one another like you would in any business relationship. And, it's not an easy thing to go in and out of that. So we had to really make some decisions to do that. So then even from a board level, from an organizational level, I stepped off a lot of things and went, okay. And that was the hardest moment. Now today, you couldn't pay me to go and do any of that. But, back then it was, you really have to count the cost and make some decisions. What is it that you want it to become? 90% of the battle is there. The rest of the stuff is going to work itself up. Do we have moments of, where I'm going to voice some things? Yes. They're few and far between, but there are some things that I might really, and my husband will really listen. If I come in and I think in the last 5 years, because there's been so much volatility in the world and we've had to really, like everybody else, go, the stakes have changed, and with technology and with AI, the whole trafficking world has changed. So I've had some thoughts about that. And because I don't get involved in micromanaging, the board, my husband's going to stop and say, okay, let's really think about what, you're saying and value it. But again, I've got to be strong enough to go, okay, if they come up with a different way or a different priority list, then I've got to be okay with that and still be a strong advocate with my responsibility, which is really to advocate around the world. That's the greatest strength I can bring to the movement.
That's great. Yeah. Christine, if I just summarize a couple of things that you said that I think are real significant. One was just a willingness to admit you may not be best at everything. You've got a great idea, but your husband or other people that come around you may be better at certain things. And so there's a sense of humility there if you're going to take it to the next level. And so you kind of said you had a choice. It could continue to be your passion and just stay there, or you could take it to the next level. And I think oftentimes we're afraid to admit others could do better. We're afraid to let go. We're afraid to trust other people. We're afraid to be accountable. I mean, part of what you even talked about with the board and the team is there's accountability on your part. And so and you talked about that cost or that sense of loss of, well, I'm not making every decision. Now other people get to make it too. And so to some degree, if we're not willing to open our hands up a little bit, it's never going to go to that next level. And yet we think I'm the one that has to drive it when you're saying almost the exact opposite to some degree.
Oh, no, to a big degree. I would say to the major degree, it's the exact opposite, is that I kind of know what I'm accountable for. And the fact is, I'm getting older. I'm still young and believing I'm still in this for a long time. But, if I truly wanted to outlast me, then every year there are certain things I'm taking a step back more and more. And it's a lot easier to do if you just kind of like retire, peace out, you can take it all. But letting go when you're in it and still knowing this is my greatest value to the organization. I'd like to be doing 50 other things, but this is how I can best add value. And you birthed it, but you almost have to step outside of it while you're still in it. And it's got more to do with your inner world then, and your ability to manage your ego, to manage it's got much more to do with that than any skill at this point in my life. The people that we have that run every facet of this, every one of them, without exception, is more skilled in their area than I ever will be. That's without exception. You take a risk, but you put people in a place to do a job, and then you've got to empower them to do that job. You cannot micromanage them, not if you want to keep really good people. And they've got to have a stake. They've got to have a stake in it and feel a sense of ownership. So most of this has got to do with my internal regulation, way more at this point than any of my external skills.
I love that you talked about ego, and it's what does our ego allow to happen around us? And so do we believe other people can thrive and do better? I was challenged several years ago, Christine, by Jim Collins, and he talks about 5 levels of leadership. His level 5, in my mind, selfishly, I'm thinking, surely I'm a level 5 leader. And he rattled me when he said, you're never a level 5 leader until you've actually left the organization you're leading. And it's better with you gone than with you there. And you're using words like legacy, wanting it to go on beyond you. And that's really what he's saying. He's saying, Christine, if it's going to go on beyond you, you've got to set it up where it's better with you gone than with you there. And for me, that's where the ego kicks in, because I want it to be best when I'm there, because that's going to make me look good. And so I think ego is a huge part of how do we lead and have an organization that's going to thrive beyond us.
Especially for those of us that, even profess to be Christians, because ultimately we're saying that Christ should have all the glory and it's really about his kingdom. And you never really know whether it's about your empire or his kingdom.
Like my little kingdom. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly. Christine, as you look towards the future, what are the personal challenges you're kind of facing? One may be, how do I make sure that these things go on and sustain after I'm gone? But what are a couple of challenges that you find yourself facing personally?
Yeah, I think it's navigating, particularly in the, I alluded to it right at the beginning, in the activist space of helping a generation come through to understand, like they're very passionate in the short term about so many things. But there's a couple of things that are very crucial. Number one, this sort of social media activism, there's a place for it. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't translate to changing someone's life on the ground, you're not going to get a dopamine rush doing that. The kind of activism I'm talking about is not dopamine rush, because it's long term. Often there's ingratitude on the other end. You're coming up against blockages. So
sacrifice. You mentioned sacrifice on your part to do it.
I want to say that you've got to be willing, and also the development of resilience and perseverance. I would say they're the 2 biggest issues moving forward, because we live in such an instant society, and I think that's part of why if I press I get this rush and I feel like I've done something now. And because kind of that urgency, that instant, we have verbs now like I Uber. We don't have Amazon, we have Amazon now. We have we have things that whereas activism, very little changes overnight. I want people to hear this. I have been involved in next generation ministry for almost 4 decades. I've been involved in helping to fight against human trafficking for 2 decades. I've been helping to empower women for almost 4 decades. None of this, has there been pain and suffering and betrayal and failure and me making mistakes in all of that? And has there been, would it have been easier to quit at times? Yes. But without what actually keeps you in it is resilience, it's tenacity, it's endurance. No wonder, in the book of Hebrews, the writer to the Hebrews says, you will have need of endurance. And if you are too fragile and you're in your 20s and 30s and, at the first challenge or obstacle or hurdle or betrayal, you're going to tap out. You're never going to change anything. It's 2 decades before you even find your feet. It's like, so I'm kind of going, strap yourself in. You've got to do, and if you're not willing to put in, that training in the beginning, and it's harder. It is harder in this generation because we're just so used to instant gratification. And if we don't see results overnight, we tap out and move on to the next thing. And then we never change anything. I would say now at A21, or at almost the 20-year mark, we are just stepping into some things, and they're the big discussions we're having globally, that we think, I think we could start to now move the needle on. We've got enough credibility. We've got enough runs on the board. We know a bit more now. I think we can preempt some things. But you're talking 2 decades down the road before we're even having those conversations.
Lots of, like you said, heartache, lots of good decisions, but lots of wrong decisions, lots of different personalities. So if somebody's looking at you saying that's where they want to be, then you use the word, I think, buckle up or strap yourself in, because it's going to be a challenging journey, but it's worth it in the long run. But start where you are. Start with the passions you have, trust others. So love the things you're saying, Christine. Appreciate the work that you're doing and the example, the model you are for so many people, men and women, but even women specifically, that women, it is okay to lead, and women do make a difference. And so thank you for being that kind of an example and that kind of leader. Appreciate you very much.
David. I so appreciate you all now. Thank God for what you're doing. I love it so much.
Thank you. So if somebody wants to keep up with you and what you're doing, how do they keep up with you?
Oh, I think you can find me on all the things, but, Instagram is where I am most sort of, present. Obviously, that's Christine Caine. And then all the information's on our website, christinecaine.com or a21.org.
Great. Christine, thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for taking time with us and letting people learn from you and growing from you, and wish you the best as you continue to move forward.
Thanks, David. So appreciate you.
Christine Caine has always been a woman I deeply admire, and this conversation just confirms that admiration even more. As a woman in leadership myself, I resonate so much with her passion to remove roadblocks for developing female leaders. I know so many women, including myself, who have had to navigate unique challenges to figure out where we fit, both in ministry and in the marketplace. I've walked alongside women who wrestle with the tension of motherhood and career, and the sometimes conflicting messages society places on both. To have someone like Christine leading the way, creating opportunities for women to stand firmly and confidently in their calling, that is incredibly impactful work. I also personally needed her reminder to simply start where you are. It's easy to feel paralyzed in today's world of shiny graphics and curated feeds, isn't it? But what a gift to remember that leadership doesn't have to be perfect or polished to begin. Notice the passion inside you. Take that first step and start right where you are. You never know how God might grow it. And as David mentioned in his conversation with Christine, one reason we create the summit is because we believe each year there are seeds planted in individual hearts, seeds that are meant to be acted on so that people can fulfill their purpose and communities can flourish. If you are at the summit this year, I wonder, what seed was planted in you, and have you taken a next step toward it? And if you weren't at the summit, maybe this conversation stirred something new in you. Maybe God is pointing you towards something, or maybe there's simply a thought that keeps circling in your mind. My hope is that this episode encourages you to take just one step toward it. As always, I'm so glad you joined us today. I know you're looking to create deep impact through your leadership, and I want to say this personally to you. At the summit, we really believe in the value of your influence and that you were created to lead right where you are. So here's our invitation to you. Go and do it. Lead exactly where you're planted, and know this, we are with you 100% of the way. If this episode encouraged you, would you do us a favor? Please like, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps more people discover this content, and it means a lot to us. And remember, everyone has influence, so lead where you are.